I'm Janelle, I work for Cold Creek, and I'm in the process of planting a pollinator garden in my yard. And what I wanted to do this morning is share with you my thought process in selecting my plants, and also show you some of the plants that we have here at Cold Creek and how you can incorporate them into your garden. Now, the hardest part of a pollinator garden is selecting the plants. And as you can see behind me, we have not made it easy. There are more than 100 feet of tables here, all filled with perennials. And you have to select the few that will fit in your garden. So this is what I've done, and I want to plant the things that I like, the things that I want to see every day when I walk out my back door. And when I talk about pollinators, I'm not talking just about the butterflies, but the bees and the butterflies, because they're all pollinators and they're all attracted to these flowers. They're not mutually exclusive. So the first thing that I'm looking at, well, a couple things. I want to have plants that are blooming all summer long. It's important in the middle of the summer to have stuff for the bees, because the vegetables are done blooming, the blueberries are done blooming, the azaleas are done. So really for the beekeepers, they need people growing things in the summertime to feed their bees. I'm going to talk a little bit about host plants. Host plants are the plants that butterflies lay their eggs on. And then the caterpillars, when the eggs hatch, the caterpillars will eat the plant. And when they're done feeding, they'll go off to form their cocoons, and then we'll have another generation of butterflies. So it's important for butterflies to have both pollinator plants and host plants. And I'll show you a couple of those that we have here at Cold Creek. So the first plant I'm looking at is yarrow or yarrow. Is it potato or potato? I don't know. But it's an earlier bloomer, and I like the look of the color of the foliage, and it's going to have a cluster of blooms at the top, and I just think it's going to be really pretty. Another easy plant to grow that comes in a lot of varieties is lantana. And these are two of the colors that we currently have, and we'll have more as the summer goes on. It's still a little early in the season for lantana. In your yard, it's really still just breaking dormancy and growing. The great thing about lantana is it blooms from when it starts to bloom all the way till frost. And both the butterflies and the bees are attracted to it. It's a very hardy plant, and typically it will come back year after year. Some varieties are more of an annual. This one is going to reliably come back year after year. It's sort of in that same family are verbena. Verbena are also lower and spreading, and you can see some of the colors that we have. They're amazing. And they're also very hardy and reliably come back. This is another color that we have. I think this color's beautiful. Another plant that's going to go in my garden is goldenrod. And for those of you that think goldenrod is going to affect your allergies, it's actually not. I Googled that last night. We have two different sizes. One is a normal size, which gets about 3-4 feet tall. The other is a dwarf. And it's a midsummer through fall bloomer, and it's yellow. Personally, I like yellow in the garden because it's eye-catching. And yellow is my focus color, and then I accent with other colors. But I think this is going to be neat, and the monarchs like this also. Salvia, which comes in a variety of colors and sizes, and blooms reliably through the summer. And the nice thing, or the fun thing about salvia is it attracts hummingbirds. And I've already seen hummingbirds out here on the salvia. So I'm going to have a couple of these also. This is sedum, and this variety is autumn joy, and it blooms in the fall, late summer to fall, with a really pretty pink bloom. And the individual blooms on the plant are really tiny, so they attract these really tiny little bees and these little wasp-looking things. When you plant some of these plants and you watch them through the summer, you're going to see a variety of pollinators that you've never seen before. And different size pollinators are attracted to different size flowers. So if you have a variety of sizes, like the salvia is a big bloom, this is going to have a tiny bloom. You're going to see completely different pollinators on those plants. And that's part of the fun of having a pollinator garden. One plant that is lots of fun, this is Asclepias tuberosa. It's in the milkweed family, and you can see here, you can see it, it's going to have a reddish bloom on it, and usually they're red and yellow. And then this one here, you can't really see the color yet, is a yellow one. These will get about 3 feet tall. It's a tropical milkweed, but this is the host plant for the monarch. And when these start to bloom out here on the perennial gardens, you'll see a lot of monarchs, and then pretty soon you'll see caterpillars on them. And there are people that will come and buy these plants, and they'll look for the ones that have eggs and caterpillars on them. And then you need to be careful because you're gonna have to keep buying more. There's a children's book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. They're gonna eat a lot, but it's a lot of fun, especially for your kids to watch the caterpillars grow, knowing that they're gonna go off and form a cocoon or a chrysalis and then hatch, and you're gonna have another generation of butterflies. I'm just gonna mention a few other ones, like black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers. I think we have some Monarda here, which is bee balm. You can see behind me Coreopsis, which are earlier bloomers. So come out, peruse the perennial tables. There are people out here that can help you make your selections, but pick the plants that you like and enjoy them through the summer. Right now I'm going to talk to you about including herbs as part of a perennial garden. It may not occur to a lot of you that herbs can be an important part of a pollinator garden. Herbs have a long bloom time, and there are herbs that are blooming in the middle of summer when there's not a lot of other things blooming, so they're important to keep feeding the pollinators. I'm just going to mention a few here, but one thing about herbs is I cook a lot with herbs, so I actually have 2 separate batches of herbs. When you're using them for cooking, you don't want to let them bloom because it changes the flavor. So because I cook a lot and I use a lot of basil and oregano, they never have time to bloom. So I plant plants just for the pollinators, which I then don't use, and I let them bloom all summer. So I'm just going to show you a few that I have. Rosemary, which in South Carolina can get fairly good size. I do use my rosemary even when it's blooming. You can't use enough rosemary off a plant like this to keep it from blooming. Oregano, which I didn't bring out here. Oregano can get fairly good size, so leave plenty of room for it. I mean, you can always keep them pruned back, but I love the smell of oregano and I like to use it in cooking, but it also blooms heavily in all summer, and it's great for the smaller bees and butterflies. Sage is one that's important, and when I asked a beekeeper about what did he need for his bees in the summer, sage was one of the things that he mentioned. It blooms all summer. There are different varieties of this, so you can get a different look with the leaves. I don't cook with sage, but it's a pretty plant. Basil is my favorite. It's my favorite cooking herb, but it's also my favorite for pollinators. I had a basil last summer that got about this tall. It was huge. And I had not only butterflies, I had really large bumblebees on it. And the bumblebees slept on the plant. I went out at dusk one night and it was covered in bumblebees and they were asleep. And I've had other customers come in and tell me about the bumblebees sleeping on their basil. So if you want an herb that's just a lot of fun to watch the pollinators, basil is a good one. Now it's an annual. The rest of them I'm showing you are perennials, but basil is an annual, so it will die back when it gets cold. This is parsley. It's not looking very good right now because this came from my yard and it has been eaten by the caterpillars, and this is how it's grown back. It didn't even make it out of the pot. It is the host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly. And I get caterpillars later in the summer. You'll see little eggs on the leaves, and then pretty soon you'll see very hungry caterpillars eating this down. And I typically have to go and buy more parsley to finish feeding them out. And at some point we'll describe, when the kids were little, we used to put them in an aquarium and we would feed them out and let them form cocoons, and then we would release them as they came out of their cocoons. Mint is a great pollinator plant. It blooms all summer, but I want to caution you about mint. It's very invasive, so leave it in a pot unless you want it to take over your garden. My first mistake with mint was I put it in a big pot and I buried the pot because I wanted it to look like it wasn't in a pot. Well, it grew wide enough that it set roots out on the outside of the pot and then took over, so I had to dig all of that out. So I just want to caution you about that. Another plant, I don't have one, are chives, which is in the onion family. So it gets a really pretty white onion type bloom on it that also has very tiny flowers on it. So it attracts those really tiny, neat looking pollinators. We have a lot of different herbs. These are some of them. These are the herbs that I plant and the herbs that I use. I just wanted to share those with you. But always include herbs as part of a pollinator garden. Even if you don't have them with your other flowers, have them somewhere in your yard, because the pollinators are going to cover your whole yard. So you can spread these out ornamentally among your beds or other places that you can find. So plant them and enjoy them. Blueberries are great for pollinators and birds and people. Now I've got some blueberry bushes in front of you here. They're not blooming right now, but as you can see, they have bloomed because now we're full of blueberries. Blueberries do great in the South. These blueberries, they're rabbit eyes, and they were developed particularly for the Southeast and southern states because they don't require as much cold weather to set their blooms. When you plant blueberries, you need to plant at least 2 different varieties. Blueberries will self-pollinate, but they produce better fruit if they cross-pollinate. So when you're planting an area in your yard to plant blueberries, give yourself space for at least 2. I have 8 in my yard. I feed the birds as much as they want. I feed my friends, and I get all I want. Blueberries do well in our acid soil, and they want to be in some sun. We have plants that pair well. Blueberries are early season, mid-season, and late season. So we have 2 varieties of early and 2 varieties of mid. So that way you can pair up early season and mid-season. You can also pair early and mid. They bloom close enough together that they will cross-pollinate, even though they don't ripen at the same time. Blueberries bloom early in the season. When I see mine starting to bloom, usually it's still pretty cool. And I worry, are the bees ready? Where are the bees? And the minute these things start to bloom, the bees come out of nowhere. And it's still pretty cool when they're finished blooming and I don't see them again. So I don't know if they must just come out to pollinate the blueberries. But the blueberry bushes will be covered in bees. I like to go out and just watch the bees working on my blueberry bushes. Blueberries will start to ripen typically in June. I think I'm going to have some in late May this year. And depending upon the variety, they will go into July. I don't have any late season. We don't have late season here. They're just not as common, which will then go later into July. I don't think they'll make it into August. Blueberries are shallow rooted, so don't plant them deep. Keep their roots right on top of the ground. And you can mulch them with pine straw, which is acidic, and blueberries like acid soil. You need to make sure that you water them. If you don't water them, your blueberries are going to turn into raisin berries. So they need the water to fill. I water mine 3 times a week and make sure I soak the full root beds. You want to fertilize blueberries March, May, July. And I want to show you fertilizer. This is Hollytone or Berrytone. Berry, obviously for the berries. Hollytone is also for acid-loving plants. It's an organic, so it's a slow release. It releases over about 30 days. Some of the chemical fertilizers that you use release all at once. I like to have mine spread out over a longer period of time. And all I do is I spread about a cup of it on the ground around the blueberries. If you have a bed, you can kind of scratch it in a little bit, but I just let mine dissolve and soak into the roots over time. The most fun is to go out in your backyard and stand at your blueberry bushes and eat the blueberries right off the bush. If your bushes are big enough and you let the birds participate, There are times I'm eating the berries down here and the birds are eating the berries up there. So they're great for pollinators, they're great for the birds, and they're great for the people.